The great empire of the stars stretched across hundreds of systems, shining like a crown in the darkness of space. At the center of this mighty realm was the emperor, a man who had ruled for decades with patience, wisdom, and steady strength. He was respected not only by humans but also by the many alien allies who had joined under his banner. For him, ruling the empire was not only about power. It was about duty, about holding together fragile worlds and guiding them through endless conflict. But for all his responsibility, there was something far more precious to him than power or authority. It was his family, especially his two young daughters. They were the light of his palace, the laughter that softened the weight of leadership, the joy that made even the coldest council hall feel alive. Wherever they went, even the most stern generals found themselves smiling, and the hardest hearts warmed. The daughters were the emperor's pride, the very symbol of innocence in a galaxy full of danger. Then came the day when the laughter vanished. The daughters were last seen playing in the gardens of the palace, surrounded by caretakers and guards. It was a safe place, enclosed by tall crystal walls and guarded by loyal watchmen. No intruder could have entered without setting off alarms. Yet when the evening came, the guards could not find them. At first, the caretakers thought they were hiding. The children loved games and often played tricks, slipping behind trees or under benches to wait for their friends to discover them. But after hours of searching, panic began to spread. By nightfall, the palace was in chaos. Alarms rang across the capital. Soldiers rushed through every corridor, every hidden passage, and every chamber. The gardens were searched with lights and scanners, but nothing was found. The daughters had vanished as if the ground had swallowed them. The emperor stood at the heart of the palace as the news reached him. His face, usually calm and unshaken, grew pale. He listened to the reports in silence, his hands tightening on the arm of his throne. He ordered the entire palace sealed, no one in or out until the truth was uncovered. His voice remained steady, but those who heard it could sense the storm rising behind his words. Outside the palace, the news spread like wildfire. People whispered in the markets, in the streets, and across the stars. Some said enemies of the empire had taken them. Others whispered that old powers, forgotten and dangerous, had reached into the palace. Fear grew with every passing hour, for if the daughters were gone, what would stop the emperor from unleashing wrath upon those he suspected? The balance of peace trembled. The council of advisors gathered that night. They begged the emperor to remain calm, to show patience. Some suggested that the daughters might have slipped into one of the older tunnels that ran beneath the palace, built during wars long ago. Others feared they had been taken through advanced technology, perhaps teleportation devices stolen from lost civilizations. Theories grew wild, but none brought comfort. The emperor listened to all, but when the council finished, he rose from his seat. His eyes, usually soft when speaking of family, burned like fire. "My daughters are not pieces on a board," he said. "They are not symbols to be debated. They are my children. I will search every world, every ruined station, every dark corner of this galaxy until I find them. I will not rest, and I will not forgive those who hide them from me." From that moment, the empire moved like a single machine. Fleets of ships took to the stars. Scouts and soldiers began sweeping through every border, searching for any trace. Drones scanned abandoned moons and forgotten colonies. Teams of investigators questioned traders, travelers, and wanderers. The search spread further and further until it touched even the quiet corners of the empire where war had not reached in centuries. Among those chosen for the search was a human commander named Rin. He was young compared to the other leaders, but his courage and loyalty had earned him the emperor's trust. His crew was small, but they were known for pushing through the hardest missions. When Rin received his orders, he stood straight and nodded once. "We will find them," he said. His words were simple, but his crew believed him. Weeks passed, then months. Still, no sign of the daughters was found. The palace grew quiet. Where once the sound of laughter echoed, now silence ruled. The emperor walked the halls alone, often staring at the gardens where they were last seen. Servants and guards lowered their eyes when he passed, for they could feel the grief behind his silence. Yet he never allowed despair to claim him in front of others. His people needed strength, and he gave it, though his heart ached with every passing day. Far from the palace, in distant space, the search grew desperate. Rin's crew found broken stations drifting in the dark, places where old battles had left nothing but wreckage. They found strange signals only to discover them false, echoes of natural radiation or pirate tricks. They found trails of cloth on ruined colonies, only to realize they belonged to strangers long gone. Every clue ended in disappointment, yet they pressed on. As time stretched, doubt began to grow among many. Some whispered that the daughters might never be found. Others said perhaps they had been taken beyond the borders of the galaxy, into the unknown regions where no human ship dared to go. But the Emperor never gave up. Each evening he stood by the balcony of his palace looking at the stars. He spoke quietly. Words meant only for himself, though sometimes the guards nearby thought they could hear. "I will find you. Hold on. Do not give up on me." Those words, carried only by the wind, became a silent vow that kept him moving forward. The daughters were missing, yes, but he refused to believe they were lost. The bond of family was stronger than time, stronger than distance, stronger than any shadow that tried to keep them apart, and so the search continued. A flame burning in the cold of space, a promise that would not be broken. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into long months. The palace never returned to its old life. The laughter of the Emperor's daughters was missing, and the quiet inside the great hall seemed heavier than stone. Every servant walked with lowered eyes, and even the generals who had fought in great wars did not know how to comfort their ruler. The Emperor's voice stayed steady in public, but in private, he often stood near the tall windows of the palace watching the stars with unblinking eyes. The search never stopped. From one end of the empire to the other, ships flew with orders to look in every place where a trace could be found. Some searched busy trade stations, asking questions to merchants and travelers. Some searched barren planets where no life had remained for centuries. Others traveled to the edges of forgotten space, where broken satellites drifted and ancient ruins floated. Every unit of the empire was moving, because everyone knew this was more than the loss of 2 children. If the Emperor lost hope, the empire itself might fall apart. Commander Rin was among those who carried the heaviest burden. His small crew had been assigned to search the far reaches of the Outer Rim, a dangerous stretch of stars where law was weak and shadows grew strong. His ship, the Horizon, was not the largest, but it was fast and strong enough to survive in unfriendly places. Rin had sworn to the Emperor himself that he would search without rest. His crew believed him because Rin never broke a promise. Every day the crew rose early. They checked scanners, studied old maps, and set new courses. They visited stations where scavengers lived, trading food for information. They stepped into broken ships that had drifted in silence for decades, searching for any clue. They followed strange signals only to find they came from storms or from wreckage that meant nothing. Each time they failed, they did not give up. Rin reminded them of the Emperor's words. "The daughters must be alive. Until we find proof, we search." The crew respected this. They were tired, but their spirits did not break. One evening, the Horizon landed on a dust-covered moon. The surface was cracked like old glass, and the ruins of a settlement lay broken across the plain. Long ago, settlers had come to this place to build a life, but war and famine had driven them away. Only ruins and silent machines remained. Rin and his team searched the empty houses. They found children's toys made of wood, rusted farming tools, and broken machines that had once pulled water from the ground. They also found carvings on the stone walls, marks of people who had lived there with hope. For a moment, Rin stood in silence, looking at the carvings. They showed families together, hands linked, children laughing. His thoughts went to the Emperor's daughters, to the palace gardens where they once played. His chest grew heavy, but he forced himself forward. "Keep searching," he told his crew. "Even ruins can hide answers." The crew moved deeper into the settlement. In one of the fallen towers, they found a strange device half buried in dust. It was not part of the settlement. Its design was older, far older than human history. Lines of silver metal curved around it, glowing faintly as if some hidden power still lived inside. The crew studied it with care. One of them, a technician named Lero, ran his hands across the metal. "This does not belong here," Lero said. "It is alien, older than this moon, older than us." Rin looked at the device. "Could it be connected to the disappearance? Perhaps," Lero replied. "The energy is strange. Not like our machines. It bends signals. It hides itself. If someone had more of these, they could cloak an entire ship." Rin ordered the device taken aboard the Horizon. It was not proof of the daughter's location, but it was a piece of a larger puzzle. Someone somewhere had left this behind, and if they could cloak a ship, perhaps they could also cloak people. The discovery gave the crew new strength. They believed they were finally on a trail worth following. Days later, they traveled to a trading hub near the border. The hub was full of ships from many species, each selling goods or seeking work. Rin's crew asked questions carefully. They spoke with traders who had traveled through dangerous sectors, mercenaries who guarded caravans, and even old miners who had worked in places no one else dared to go. Most had nothing to say. But one miner, a wrinkled man with skin darkened by years near radiation storms, leaned close when Rin asked about missing children. "I heard a story," the miner whispered. "A story of lights on a hidden moon. Not natural lights. They pulsed in patterns. Some said it was the work of an old civilization. Some said it was a trap. I never went myself, but those who did never came back." Rin's eyes narrowed. "Where is this moon?" The miner shook his head. "It shifts. The maps do not hold it steady. It appears and disappears, hidden by a storm of energy. But I will give you a course. Follow it, and maybe you will find what you seek. Or maybe you will never return." Rin took the course, thanked the miner, and returned to the horizon. His crew looked at him with questions in their eyes, but he only nodded. "We have a lead. It may be dangerous, but it may also be the only path left." The crew did not argue. They trusted their commander, and they trusted the promise he had made to the Emperor. The horizon left the hub and entered the dark stretch of space known as the Veil. It was a region feared by most travelers, filled with storms of shifting energy and broken gates that once linked ancient empires. Ships that entered the Veil often did not return. But for Rin and his crew, fear meant nothing. For days they pushed forward, guided by the miner's course. The storms shook their ship, filling the viewports with colors that danced like fire. Their scanners flickered and sometimes went blind, leaving them to rely on old-fashioned sight and instinct. Each hour felt longer than the last, but they refused to turn back. At last, the storms parted, and before them lay a small moon, half shrouded in a strange blue glow. The glow pulsed, fading and returning as if alive. The moon did not appear on their maps, but it floated there, real and silent. The crew stared in awe. "This must be it," Lero said softly. Rin's jaw tightened. He remembered the miner's warning. Ships had come here and never returned. Yet in his heart he felt this was no ordinary place. "We will land," he said firmly, "and we will search. If there is any chance the daughters are here, we cannot ignore it." The crew prepared in silence. Each member checked weapons, scanners, and suits. Fear was there in their eyes, but stronger than fear was determination. They knew what was at stake. The horizon descended toward the glowing surface. The closer they came, the stronger the pulse of light became, as if the moon itself was watching them. The scanners filled with strange readings, lines of data that made no sense. Energy fields wrapped the surface, twisting signals and hiding shapes. When they landed, the ground shook under their feet. Cracks of silver light spread through the soil, glowing like rivers of energy. In the distance, ruins rose against the horizon, shaped not by human hands but by something far older. The crew stepped out, their suits shining faintly in the blue glow. The air smelled of ozone, thick and sharp, and every sound echoed strangely as if the moon itself were whispering. Rin raised his hand, pointing toward the ruins. "We search there," he said. "Stay together. Stay alert. Something is waiting for us." The crew followed, their steps steady. The search for the daughters had brought them across endless stars. Now at last it had brought them to this hidden world. And though they did not yet know it, the true test of their strength and humanity was about to begin. The hidden moon was unlike any place the crew of the horizon had ever seen. The surface glowed with silver cracks that stretched across the land like veins of light. The air carried a strange hum, a sound that seemed to rise from the ground itself. Every step echoed through the ruins as if the stones remembered voices from long ago. Commander Rin stood at the front, his eyes fixed on the towering structures that rose in the distance. They were not shaped like human buildings. Instead, they curved like spirals, their walls lined with markings that shone faintly in the moonlight. Some looked like towers reaching into the sky, while others bent inward, forming arches that seemed to hold up nothing but air. "This place was built by a people older than us," Rin said quietly. "Perhaps older than any of our allies, too." Lero, the technician, walked beside him. His scanner beeped with confusion, lines of data flickering across the screen. "The energy here bends everything. Lero said. "It twists the signals. It feels alive." The rest of the crew stayed close, weapons ready but eyes wide with awe. None of them spoke loudly, for it felt wrong to break the silence of the ancient place. As they stepped into the ruins, the glow under their feet grew brighter. The symbols carved into the walls lit up one by one as if welcoming their arrival. The crew froze, startled. "Do not fear it," Rin said. "It may be a sign we are on the right path." They pressed on. The ruins opened into a wide hall, its ceiling so high it vanished into shadow. At the center stood a circle of crystal pillars, each humming with a deep tone that echoed through the chamber. The sound vibrated in their chests, steady like a heartbeat. Rin approached the nearest pillar. When he touched it, the hum grew louder, and an image appeared above it made of light. The crew gasped. It was a vision of the palace gardens, the very place where the daughters had last been seen. The image flickered, then shifted to show two small figures standing hand in hand, their faces faint but familiar. "The daughters," one of the crew whispered. Rin's heart pounded, but he forced himself to stay calm. "This place is connected to their disappearance. They were brought here, or perhaps drawn here." Before they could study further, the chamber shook. Cracks of light spread across the floor, and from the far side of the hall, shapes began to rise. They were tall, made of crystal and stone, their bodies glowing with the same silver energy that flowed through the moon. They moved with slow, heavy steps, their eyes shining like stars. Guardians. The crew raised their weapons, but Rin lifted his hand. "Wait, do not fire unless we must. They may not be enemies." The Guardians stopped, standing in a circle around the crew. Their glowing eyes stared with no expression, yet there was weight in their presence, as if they were measuring the humans, judging their worth. One Guardian stepped forward. It lifted its hand, and a beam of light extended toward Rin. For a moment he thought it was an attack, but the beam only touched his chest. Images flashed before his eyes, visions of battles, of humans standing against storms, of families holding each other in times of despair. He realized the Guardians were not only measuring strength, but the heart behind it. "I understand," Rin whispered. "They test us." The Guardian lowered its hand and stepped back. The circle broke, and the Guardians moved aside, leaving a path open deeper into the ruins. "They want us to continue," Lero said with relief. The crew moved forward, hearts racing. The Guardians did not follow, but their glowing eyes remained fixed on the humans until they vanished into the next chamber. The new passage sloped downward. The walls were covered in flowing light, and the air grew warmer. As they walked, time itself seemed to blur. One moment the passage was long and endless, the next it shortened into only a few steps. Some crew members swore they saw their own shadows move differently, faster or slower than their bodies. "It is bending time," Lero muttered. "This place does not follow the rules of our universe." At last they entered a chamber larger than any before. In the center stood a great structure like a cocoon, made of crystal strands that pulsed with golden light. Inside, faint shapes rested, but the strands were too thick to see clearly. Rin stepped closer, his breath caught in his throat. He could not see the faces, yet something inside him told him who they were. "The daughters," he whispered. The crew gathered around, eyes wide with wonder. The cocoon pulsed, and a soft sound filled the chamber, almost like the voices of children singing far away. But before they could celebrate, the ground shook again. From the shadows of the chamber, more Guardians rose, larger than the ones before. Their forms were sharper, their glow brighter, and their movements faster. These were not watchers. These were protectors. "They will not let us near," Rin said. He tightened his grip on his weapon. "We must prove ourselves again." The Guardians advanced. Their steps echoed like thunder, and their glowing arms extended with blades of crystal. The crew spread out, moving with discipline. Shots of energy lit the chamber, striking against the Guardians. The Guardians absorbed the blasts, their crystal bodies cracking but not breaking. They struck back, their arms swinging with deadly force, cutting through the stone floor. Rin ducked under a strike and fired at a Guardian's core, the glowing center of its chest. The beam cut deep, and the Guardian froze before collapsing into shards of crystal. "Strike their cores," Rin shouted. The crew obeyed. One by one, they targeted the glowing centers. It was not easy. The Guardians were strong and unrelenting, their strikes shaking the chamber. But the humans fought with determination. Sweat dripped down their faces, and their arms grew heavy. But their will did not break. Finally, the last Guardian fell. its body shattering into pieces that scattered like stars across the floor. The chamber grew silent again, save for the soft hum of the cocoon. The crew stood breathless, their bodies bruised but alive. Rin lowered his weapon and approached the cocoon once more. The golden strands pulsed as if answering his presence. He reached out, but before his hand could touch, a wave of energy pushed him back. Laro hurried to his side, scanning the cocoon. It is not ready to open. The energy inside is still protecting them. If we force it, we may harm them. Rin clenched his fists. His heart ached to free them, but he knew Laro was right. The cocoon was both a prison and a shield. We must find a way to release them safely, Rin said. This place holds the key. Somewhere in these ruins, there must be a way. The crew nodded, though exhaustion showed in their eyes. They had fought hard, but their mission was not yet complete. As they turned to search the chamber for clues, the cocoon pulsed again, brighter than before. For a brief moment, the strands of crystal grew transparent, and the crew saw them clearly. Two young girls, resting peacefully as if asleep, their faces calm and untroubled. Rin's breath caught. "They are alive," he whispered. Hope surged through the crew. After months of searching, after endless disappointment, they had found proof at last. The daughters of the Emperor were here, safe inside the cocoon. But the journey was far from over. The ruins still held secrets, and the Guardians were not the only dangers. To free the daughters, the humans would need to uncover the truth of this ancient place. A truth that could change not only the fate of the Emperor's family, but of the entire empire. The chamber of the cocoon glowed softly, the golden strands pulsing like a giant heartbeat. Commander Rin stood at the center with his crew, still breathing heavily from the battle against the Guardians. Their weapons were scratched and their armor dented, but none of them cared. Before them, inside the cocoon, the Emperor's daughters rested peacefully. The sight gave them hope but also fear, for they knew the hardest part had only begun. Laro adjusted his scanner and frowned. The cocoon is still active. The energy surrounding it is too strong. If we try to break it with force, we could harm them. Rin looked at the pulsing strands. Then we do not break it. We find the key that opens it. The crew spread out across the chamber, searching for clues. The walls shimmered with symbols, their light shifting like water. When touched, the symbols moved, forming new shapes. Some seemed to tell stories of people long gone, people who had built this place with knowledge far beyond human science. One crew member, Sira, pointed at a large panel near the far wall. "This looks different. The patterns here are not random. They look like a sequence, like steps." Rin studied it. The symbols shifted in lines, glowing one after another, but always stopping short before reaching the end. It was like a puzzle waiting to be completed. Laro compared the symbols with the readings from his scanner. "It may be a sequence that controls the cocoon. If we complete it correctly, the strands might open safely. And if we fail," Rin asked, "then the energy could collapse, trapping them forever." The room grew silent. The risk was heavy, but Rin's eyes never wavered. "We will not fail." He stepped forward and placed his hand on the panel. The symbols lit up under his touch, shifting into new patterns. The hum in the chamber grew louder and the cocoon pulsed brighter. It was as if the entire ruin was watching him, waiting to see if he was worthy. One by one, Rin followed the sequences, guided by instinct more than knowledge. Each time he chose, the chamber shook, and the Guardians carved into the walls seemed to move. His crew watched in silence, ready to defend him if more crystal warriors rose. At last, the final symbol lit up, and the cocoon shuddered. The golden strands loosened slightly, parting just enough to show the faces of the daughters more clearly. Their eyes remained closed, but their chests rose and fell in calm rhythm. "They are alive," Rin whispered again, relief in his voice. But before the cocoon could fully open, the ground trembled. Cracks spread through the chamber floor, glowing with the same energy that ran through the ruins. The walls shook and dust rained from above. "The structure is collapsing," Laro shouted. "We have disturbed the core." From the far end of the chamber, a new guardian rose. This one was larger than all the others, its body covered in layers of crystal that shone like 1,000 suns. Its eyes glowed red instead of silver, and its steps thundered like falling mountains. The final protector. Rin raised his weapon, his voice firm. "This is the last test." "Hold your ground!" The guardian roared, its voice like breaking stone, and charged forward. Its arms were blades of crystal, sharp enough to cut through steel. It swung at the humans, forcing them to scatter. The crew fired with all their strength, aiming for its core, but the layers of crystal shielded it. "Too strong," Lero shouted. "We must break its armor first." Rin darted forward, drawing the Guardian's attention. He fired at its shoulders, forcing it to block. While it focused on him, Sira and two others circled to its back, striking at the cracks in its armor. The blasts chipped pieces away, but the Guardian's strikes were swift and deadly. One swing nearly split the floor where Rin had stood moments before. The battle raged across the chamber. The cocoon pulsed wildly as if it sensed the danger. Energy waves spread out, pushing the humans and Guardian alike. The ruins groaned under the strain, the ceiling splitting open to reveal the glowing sky above. At last, Sira shouted, "Its back is weakening." "Strike now," Rin seized the chance. He rushed forward, sliding under the Guardian's blade, and fired directly into the exposed crack. The shot pierced through, striking the core. The Guardian froze, its body shaking as light poured from the wound. Then with a deafening crack, it shattered into countless shards that scattered across the chamber like falling stars. The crew stood breathless, their weapons lowered. The Guardian was gone, but the ruin continued to collapse. The floor split wider and huge stones fell from above. "We must take them now," Rin said, pointing at the cocoon. Lero hesitated. "It is still sealed. If we pull them out too soon?" "We have no choice," Rin interrupted. "If this place falls, they will be buried forever." Together, the crew surrounded the cocoon. They fired carefully at the strands, weakening them without touching the daughters inside. The golden light flared, resisting them, but the strands broke one by one. Finally, the cocoon split open, and the two young girls slipped into Rin's arms, their bodies light and warm. "They are safe," he said, his voice trembling for the first time. The crew cheered, but the chamber gave them no time. Stones crashed around them and the floor shook violently. Rin lifted the daughters and carried them close to his chest. "We move now, back to the ship." They ran through the collapsing halls. The Guardians carved into the walls cracked and fell apart, their glowing eyes fading. The passages they had entered twisted and shifted, but the light from the cracks in the ground guided their path. Each step was a fight against time. At one point, a section of the ceiling fell, blocking their way. Lero and two others blasted the rubble aside, clearing a path while Rin shielded the daughters with his body. Dust filled the air, choking them, but they pressed forward. The ruins seemed endless, each turn bringing new dangers. Bridges broke under their feet, forcing them to leap across gaps. Walls of light rose suddenly but faded when struck with their weapons. It was as if the ruins themselves were trying to hold them, unwilling to let the daughters go. At last the crew burst out into the open air. The glowing sky stretched above and the horizon stood waiting where they had landed. The ground cracked behind them, entire towers collapsing into dust. "Move!" Rin shouted. They sprinted across the silver soil, the daughters still curled in his arms. The cracks widened, glowing rivers of energy spreading like fire. The moon groaned as if alive, as if it knew its treasure had been taken. One final quake shook the ground, nearly throwing them down, but they reached the ship. The crew rushed inside, sealing the hatch as stones crashed outside. "Lift off," Rin ordered. The horizon roared to life, its engines pushing against the collapsing ground. The ship rose, shaking violently as the moon split apart beneath them. Towers of light burst from the cracks, chasing them into the sky, but the ship pulled free, breaking through the storms that wrapped the moon. From the viewport, they saw the ruins collapse into dust, swallowed by the glowing cracks. The hidden moon began to fade, its light dimming until it vanished completely, leaving only empty space where it had been. The crew sat in silence, staring at the void. They had escaped, but the mystery of the ruins was gone, swallowed forever. Rin looked down at the daughters, resting peacefully in his arms. Their breathing was steady, their faces calm, as if they had only been asleep. He brushed the dust from their hair and smiled faintly. "They are safe," he repeated. "We have kept our promise." The crew cheered softly, exhaustion mixing with joy. They had faced storms, guardians, and collapsing ruins, but they had succeeded. The Emperor's daughters were alive. The horizon set its course back to the capital. The journey would take days, but the crew did not mind. Each hour brought them closer to home, closer to delivering the most precious gift the Emperor could ever receive. And in the quiet of the ship, the daughters stirred slightly. One opened her eyes for a moment, looking up at Rin with a faint smile before drifting back into sleep. It was a small sign, but enough to remind them all that the bond of family was still unbroken. The search was over. The return had begun. The horizon sailed through the quiet sea of stars. Its engines hummed steady and calm, but inside the ship, every heart beat with restless energy. The Emperor's daughters rested in the medical bay, their bodies curled against one another like they had been inside the cocoon. Their breathing was steady, their skin warm, their faces soft with peace. The crew watched over them with awe, as if guarding not just two lives but a symbol of hope itself. Commander Rin stood by their side, his eyes never leaving them. Days had passed since they escaped the collapsing moon, but he still held the memory of that glowing chamber and the battle against the final guardian. His armor was scratched, his hands bruised, but none of that mattered. What mattered was that the daughters were safe. Approaching Capital System, Lero announced from the bridge. His voice carried through the ship with quiet triumph. We will reach the Emperor's palace within the hour. The crew exchanged looks. Some smiled, others simply breathed deeply as if letting go of a burden they had carried for too long. The search had taken months across countless worlds, through storms, battles, and shadows of despair. And now the end was near. Rin placed a hand gently on the bed where the daughters lay. You are almost home, he whispered. As the ship drew closer to the capital world, messages flooded the channels. Scouts confirmed the horizon's identity. Fleet ships moved to escort them. The news spread faster than light. Across the Empire, people stopped their work and lifted their eyes to the sky. The daughters, missing for months, were alive. The palace gates were open when the horizon landed. Soldiers lined the great court, their armor polished, their banners lifted high. The air trembled with the sound of drums. Crowds filled the plazas beyond, their voices rising like a wave of hope. Rin carried the daughters in his arms as he stepped down the ramp. The crew walked behind him, their heads held high, their boots striking the stone with pride. The soldiers saluted, their movements sharp and filled with respect. At the far end of the court, the Emperor stood waiting. His robe was dark as night, his crown simple yet heavy with meaning. His face, usually stern and unshaken, trembled with emotion as he saw his children in Rin's arms. The crowd fell silent. The world seemed to hold its breath. Rin walked the long path across the court. Each step echoed like a heartbeat. When he reached the Emperor, he bent to one knee and held the daughters out with both arms. My Emperor, he said, his voice steady but soft. Your daughters are returned. The Emperor reached forward with shaking hands. His eyes filled with tears as he took the girls into his arms. For a long moment he said nothing. He simply held them close against his chest, his face pressed to their hair, as if he feared they might vanish if he let go. The silence broke when the daughters stirred. Their eyes opened slowly, their small hands tightening against his robe. Their voices were weak yet clear. Father. The Emperor fell to his knees, his crown slipping as tears ran down his cheeks. The strongest man in the Empire wept openly, his daughters safe in his arms. The court erupted with cheers. The drums thundered again. Soldiers raised their banners, and the people beyond the gates cried with joy. The empire that had been weighed down by sorrow was lifted in one breath of hope. The Emperor stood again, his daughters still curled against his chest. His eyes, wet with tears, met Rin's. You have done what no one else could. You have given me back my heart. Rin bowed his head. They were never lost, my Emperor. They were waiting to come home. The Emperor stepped closer and placed a hand on Rin's shoulder. His grip was firm, filled with gratitude and respect. Your name will be carried in every hall of this empire. Your crew will be remembered for as long as stars burn. The crew behind Rin lowered their heads humbly. They did not seek glory, but the words of the Emperor struck their hearts with pride. The celebration lasted for days. Songs filled the streets, lights shone across the capital, and stories of the rescue spread to every world under the Emperor's rule. Merchants spoke of it in markets. Children played games where they pretended to be Rin and his crew, braving storms to save the royal daughters. The empire, once heavy with despair, now lived again with unity and strength. Yet for Rin, the greatest moment was not the cheering crowds or the Emperor's words. It was the night when the palace was quiet, and he walked alone through its gardens. The stars above were bright, their light reflecting on the fountains. He found the Emperor seated by a tree, his daughters asleep in his lap, wrapped in soft blankets. They do not leave my side, the Emperor said softly, looking down at them. Even when they sleep, they hold my robe as if afraid I will vanish. They were alone for a long time, Rin said. But they are safe now. They will heal. The Emperor looked at him with calm eyes. I do not know what they endured inside that cocoon. Perhaps it was a prison, perhaps a cradle. But I know this. They came back because you reached them. Because you would not stop searching. Rin said nothing. He simply bowed his head. The Emperor smiled faintly. When I saw them curled against me today, I thought my heart would break. I will never forget the sight. And I will never forget who gave me that gift. The daughter stirred slightly, one turning her face against her father's chest. He stroked her hair gently, his eyes soft with endless love. Rin knew then that his mission was complete. Not only had he returned the daughters, he had restored the bond between father and children, a bond that even the stars could not break. Days later, the Emperor gathered the council and the people in the grand hall. Before all who had power in the empire, he stood with his daughters at his side and declared, "We are stronger not because of crowns or armies, but because of love that endures. These children are not just mine. They are the light of our people. And it is by the courage of men and women like Rin that such light survives." The hall shook with applause. The names of Rin and his crew were carved into the records of the empire. Statues would one day be raised, but for now, the crew simply returned to the horizon, ready to sail once more into the endless sea of stars. The daughters often visited them in the hangars, smiling shyly as they walked between the machines. They would sit on the bridge and ask about the journey, their young voices filled with wonder. Though they were royal, they treated the crew as friends, not guards. For Rin, each smile was enough. He did not need riches or titles. He needed only the memory of their first breath of peace when they opened their eyes safe in his arms. And so the story of the missing daughters ended not with sorrow but with light. They had been gone for months, hidden in a place no one believed they could be, yet when they were found, they were not broken. They were not lost. They were curled against their father's chest, where they had always belonged. The stars themselves seemed brighter after that day, as if the universe had witnessed the reunion and chosen to honor it. And the Empire, guided by the love of a father and the courage of those who served him, walked forward into a future filled with hope.